Yes, exactly as you said, I think we have a great chance today, not only because we are here all together, but also because we never had the opportunity to live for so long in the human history. But this comes as a cost, because the increasing of life expectancy is like an outgoing tide, which may reveal some dangerous rocks that one have not seen before. Indeed, age is a major risk factor for several diseases, including cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and neurodegenerative diseases. There are good news. Good news is that in the last 15 years, deaths from heart diseases have decreased by 14%. But during the same period of time, deaths from Alzheimer's disease has increased by nearly 90%. So the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease is really increasing dramatically with age, which is a clear burden for our Western societies. And the worst thing is that there is currently no treatment, no effective preventive measure for this disease. So this disease currently is severely underdiagnosed in our countries, leaving many people outside of any healthcare systems. Why clinical trials have failed repeatedly over the last 20 years for finding a treatment for Alzheimer's disease? That's, of course, a big question, and there are, of course, several possible answers. One of them is that to date, we have really focused on the latest stage of the disease, which is once the symptoms are manifest and when a neurologist can diagnose the disease. But now there is clear evidence that the disease has started several decades before in the life of individuals. And much more little is known about this silent phase of the disease before the onset of the symptoms. So there is a critical need here to much better understand the effect of the disease on the brain during this phase. And the way we want to approach this problem is by building digital models of brain aging, which will somehow reproduce in silico the effect of the disease on the brain structures, the brain function, and the brain metabolism. And these digital models aim to first better understand the disease mechanisms, of course, but we want also to use that to be able to make prediction on individuals and to be able, for instance, to predict years to disease onset. So usually when I say that, people answer, well, you know, how can you do that? How can you build such models? Because, of course, or very little is known about the brain in general and about the disease mechanisms in particular. And, well, I say, look, when a child is learning how to speak, you don't teach him grammar and conjugation, okay? The child just learns how to speak because he repeats, he recombines, he mimics what it hears. And it's only when he masters the language that he can understand its rule and its structure. So we want exactly to apply the same principle here. So we'll use data from patients that came in the early phase of the disease and has left the hospital, the neurologist, without having more information of the disease. And we can reuse this to build this model. So just let me give you the big picture of the principle. So let's assume here we have seen someone 3 times in his life, and the one twice, and the one. And from all this repeated observation of the patients over time, we want to recombine and realign them to be able to build the lifelong history of the disease, built from very short-term period of disease history in many individuals. And that will be this model of disease progression that can span several years and depicts how the disease affects the brain in the different dimensions. And once we have done that, what we'll be able to do is to personalize this model to a new patient and to be able to predict the future of this patient. So it sounds really like an artificial intelligence-inspired process, and that's what it is. The problem is that most of the techniques that we know in artificial intelligence, in machine learning, in statistical learning, are not able to address properly this problem. So the project that I am leading aims precisely to develop this next generation of computational and statistical tools to be able to build these digital models. So this is quite challenging for let's say, three main reasons. The one reason is that here we need to deal with very particular data, which are mostly neuroimaging data, which has a very specific structure in it, where in statistics, usually you deal with features of the numbers, basically, a series of numbers. And this cannot be summarized in terms just of numbers. It has a really geometrical structure in it. We need to compare trajectories of changes. We need to take time into account, and that's something that the artificial intelligence community has not really taken this challenge and requires specific development. And eventually we need to detect the subtle spatiotemporal changes that will be able to make us accurate prediction on new patients. So all that together will be able to help us in designing decision support systems for neurologists and for pharmaceutical companies alike to better to detect and diagnose the disease much earlier than we can do today, to propose a reliable diagnosis for each subject and each patient, and to much better select patients into clinical trials, and to better assess the effects of the treatments and the disease progression. So that's to allows us to make a concrete implementation of the precision medicine paradigm, as we said, in the field of neurodegenerative diseases. Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Stanley. I have a question for you. You are working, well, how close are you working with patients? And what is a critical mass of patients relevant for your research?
So I do my research at the Brain and Spine Institute, which is a neuroscience institute located within a hospital, the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. So I'm not a neurologist. I'm not. I don't have patients per se, but I work closely with a neurologist in the neurological and neuroradiological departments, who have direct access to the patients. So I mostly used retrospective data, coming either from studies emerging in the local environment, but we also use data that are shared nowadays worldwide in big consortium that releasing a great amount of data that we use also.
Okay, and so you mentioned neurology. You probably need also other disciplines. So what are the disciplines that are involved or necessary for your research?
So as you understood, this research is really multidisciplinary. So it involves a medical discipline, as you said, neurology and radiology for the most part. And then it needs to engage hand in hand with mathematicians, with statisticians, with computer scientists, because there's a lot of all these methodological developments that will give rise eventually to these digital models and to these decision support systems need to be developed, yes, hands in hands between more basic science and medical science.